How's it going, guys, and welcome to another Curious review. In this video we're going to be reviewing a game called Lethe, Episode 1. And to tell you the truth, I'm a little bit conflicted about this game. Okay, so the basics. It is a survival horror game in first person, with a kind of a large amount of exploration going on in the game. Kind of light puzzle solving, but a lot of it is honestly walking around. It's on that kind of on the verge of some parts of it almost being a walking simulator type of game. It's developed by a studio, I think I'm pronouncing this correctly, Cow Studios, and published by a studio called Faber Interactive. It's their first game by the looks of it. Now, the game begins with you on a boat looking out over at a stormy sea, and there's good atmospheric music and everything going on, but here's where a slight issue right at the beginning I have is it describes your character with a wall of text on screen which you have to read and then kind of click past to continue with the game. And honestly, it's the character description. I honestly think the game would have done okay without it, although I suppose there are hints that you are a character which is described in the background text later on in the game, so I won't be too harsh over that. After that, you're on a beach and kind of wandering around. There's a weird totem-like thing in front of you which makes a weird blue glow, and you're just kind of left to explore and discover, all of which is fine. The issues I'm going to bring up are that very quickly while playing this game, you are going to come slap bang against the idea that it is very, very similar to Amnesia: The Dark Descent. Now, of course, some of you might not have played that, so some of you might be unfamiliar, but this game is very, very similar. I would almost describe it as a slightly less complicated version, like almost like a fan version of the game, just less complicated. That is not to say that it doesn't have like the same storyline or the same world or anything. It's just the gameplay mechanics that I'm going on here. Now, the world building is actually quite interesting. It's it's an occultist story, so there's kind of a mining operation. They dig up something bad that starts infecting them. There's hints that the island villagers had known about it for longer, and it changes people's minds and drives them insane and makes them do all sorts of crazy stuff, and you end up kind of getting just stuck in the middle of the facility just trying to find your way out. And there's several points throughout the story where you almost find an escape and then you get dragged back in, and that all works quite well. It's just that it would be interesting if they had framed it in their own kind of in their own mechanics, because almost the entire kind of aspect of the gameplay is entirely ripped from the Amnesia games, excepting the telekinesis ability, which you get about halfway through the game, which is quite strange actually, because while the telekinesis thing is kind of explained very vaguely as being part of the effect, the strange otherworldly stuff in the game affects people, there's no really real reason for it to have gotten you, because it kind of happens to you after you just fall down a hole, and then your hands go all sparkly and suddenly you've got telekinesis. And another weird thing about it is a lot of the telekinesis puzzles in the game involve moving boxes out of the way of holes that you could have just picked up with your hands, because you're able to walk up to the boxes, had the game given you the ability to pick up objects without the telekinesis. So I certainly feel like the telekinesis is perhaps an attempt to step away from being too much like Amnesia, which of course is a good thing. I just feel like maybe they could have done that a little bit better, and maybe incorporated some more puzzles which really needed the telekinesis. And again, this is another area of the game that gets better in the last quarter. There's actually plenty of puzzles which quite well use the telekinesis ability late on in the game. It's just that there's quite a long period where you're not really doing anything with the ability that you couldn't have done without it. And that is particularly unfortunate considering that the telekinesis ability is essentially, gameplay-wise, the only unique thing about this game. Everything else, as I've said, being essentially a mirror of other games like Amnesia: The Dark Descent. Now, this isn't to say that kind of reusing gameplay mechanics is necessarily a bad idea. I just feel like they didn't really quite put enough of themselves into this game for it to be worth the asking price. As currently the game seems to be retailing at €15, and that would, I guess, be about $18. They probably just charge you $15 though, knowing Steam. Now, so we've covered how it kind of pulls a lot of its mechanics from another game. So, but it's still a horror game. So how effective is its horror gameplay? Now, here's where I'm conflicted, because in my opinion, for most of the game, it just wasn't very scary at all. I honestly found the main creature that follows you throughout most of the game to be goofy. I mean, honestly, it just has this kind of... It's meant to look very creepy and inhuman, but it just... When I got a look at its face, I laughed. It wasn't very scary to me, and I guess, you know, maybe it will be to some people. Horror is a very subjective thing like that. It affects different people very differently. But I feel like that wasn't the best design. I won't spoil it for you because I think, in my opinion, the design of a monster in games like this is something that shouldn't really be spoiled. Now, however, for the last, I think, quarter of the game, the last hour and a half or so of gameplay, was actually quite good, and it was actually quite creepy and unsettling. The creature designs changed, the gameplay kind of amped up and got a lot more difficult, because I will say most of this game is incredibly easy with almost no challenge. The puzzles are very simple, the creatures are very easy to avoid. Even the last part of the game wasn't difficult, it was just, it felt more like an actual game. So yeah, I felt like the last hour and a half or so was actually quite compelling, and that's also when the story got more interesting as well, because it started dealing with more of the occultist side of the story. So maybe, you know, maybe it's just a little bit of a false start, a game that you have to kind of give a little bit of time to get into. And of course, it is episode 1, so presumably there's going to be more episodes to continue the story, and it does end on quite a massive cliffhanger. So perhaps as the episodes kind of get released, the series will come into its own, but we will of course have to wait and see. So, to summarize, the atmosphere and story is actually quite good, if a little tiny bit generic in places in regards to the story, but it's actually quite good, especially in the later parts of the game where I feel like it really comes into its own. However, the gameplay is unoriginal and especially, unfortunately, not done quite as well as the games that it seems to be imitating. I feel like Amnesia does this gameplay better. And for the asking price, which is a little tiny bit cheaper than Amnesia, this goes at $15 on sale and I think $16.99 off sale. And Amnesia currently goes at $19.99. Amnesia is a game which took me several full days to complete. I would say you've got, maybe 20, 25, maybe 30 if you find some of the puzzles difficult hours in Amnesia. And this game was, at most, I think, about 4 hours. So, considering the length, price, and quality of the game, I'm afraid I simply cannot recommend this game to anyone except people who have played the frictional games like Amnesia: The Dark Descent and Soma and really want something else but can't find anything. If you haven't played these games, I would play Amnesia first, and even then, for the price, I would honestly recommend waiting until the other episodes come out, and maybe if they do a season pass to get all of them in one bundle to save a bit of cash. Because while this is a passable game, it's priced a little bit out of its own league, I'm afraid. So that's about all I have to say about it. Essentially, only for particular enthusiasts of the genre who are willing to put away the cash for it. I hope you've enjoyed the video, and I hope you found this review helpful. This is the first negative review I've done of a game. So if you feel like I've been too harsh, and in some ways I do feel like I've been quite harsh in this game, because it's not actually necessarily a bad game, really. I'd give it a 4 out of 10. It's just that it's very imitative of other games and priced a little bit too highly for what it is. So if you disagree with me, I would actually welcome a little bit of debate. Give a comment in the video and we'll have a discussion about it, because that's part of what this is all about, kind of learning how to analyze and interpret games. Anyway guys, I hope you've enjoyed the video and I'll see you next time.